In this Star Wars FPS game news update video, I will be sharing with you the fact that it is a Mandalorian game, plus gameplay details, a potential release year, and more. Before we do get into all of today's news though, make sure you do subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any future news updates on this game. So late last night, a reputable gaming insider called Tom Henderson, who has had stuff right regarding Star Wars games in the past, said he knows a bit about Respawn's upcoming first-person shooter game. He did confirm it would not be Star Wars Battlefront 3, and many fans went on to guess if it would be Republic Commando, The Force Unleashed but in first person for some reason, a Mandalorian game, even KOTOR, but again this is a first-person shooter. And Tom said he would put out a report if he could get another corroboration from a source on what the game is. Well, he has put out that report. According to sources close to Respawn, he has put out that Respawn Entertainment are working on a first-person shooter game that's a Mandalorian game. This game has been in development for about 2 years now, and it's still technically in the early stages of development. Sources have told Tom that in this game, you will take control of a Mandalorian bounty hunter. At this moment in time, it is unclear as to who this Mandalorian bounty hunter is. Obviously, everyone's going to assume it's going to be Din, the Mandalorian himself. However, that's not a given at this moment in time. We do have an era though. It will be set during at the height of the Galactic Empire, so the original trilogy era. And this would be set before the Mandalorian series, so we could see Mando before the series begins, or it could be a completely new character. Tom states that it will be your job as a bounty hunter to capture bodies, dead or alive, for cash rewards. The core of the game, though, is not being a bounty hunter, it's actually the game's movement. It will have a high mobility system that's been made possible within storytelling due to the Mandalorian's jetpack. So you will be wearing a jetpack that will allow you to perform horizontal dashing, vertical jumping, as well as boost sliding, which is similar to what we see within Apex Legends and Titanfall, Respawn's other games. The same sources say that this game is going to be extremely fast-paced and will reward players who play in this style. For example, you will regenerate your health based on successive kills. In terms of weaponry, there will be a wide arsenal to choose from, along with gadgets as well, so not only will you just have a blaster, you will also be able to use a wrist rocket, a grapple hook, a visor for tagging enemies and bounties, and much more. In regards to this being an open world game or a linear game, this is going to be a linear game according to Tom's sources. Whilst this won't be an open world game, you will still be travelling to a variety of different Star Wars planets, but in linear levels, which is sort of what we expected given the job listings and this game. As for when the game will release, I think people will be a bit disappointed, even though it still makes sense. So this game, according to Tom's sources, is still a year or two away, at the very least. I sort of expected this because we've not really heard much until sort of now. Yes, we know the game has been in development for about 2 years, but it was a relatively small team for quite some time, and Respawn take time to get it right. For example, Jedi Fallen Order did take 5 years. It wasn't a Star Wars game at the beginning, but it still took quite some time and came out and did very well. Before this leak, I would have said late 2025, but it could still happen in 2026. At this moment in time, we just don't know any more details. As we know, Respawn have a rich pedigree within the FPS genre, starting all the way back with the first Medal of Honor games, Call of Duty's beginnings, including some of the best ones, and then after that they did Titanfall, Apex, along with have a separate team make the Jedi games. Due to the fact that they've shown time and time again they can deliver an exceptional game, a lot of people trust Respawn and are excited for this game. Plus, I would say out of all of the upcoming Star Wars games in development, most people seem to be most excited for this FPS game because it's a shooter and it's Respawn. As for if this game will feature a multiplayer mode, that is also unclear. As I've been talking about for quite some time, I don't expect this game to have a multiplayer mode. The job listings reiterate consistently, this is a story-driven single-player game, not a multiplayer game. And the fact that we don't know from this leak there will be a multiplayer experience definitely seems to me that there probably won't be one. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you've just heard, so please do let me know down in the comment section below. Of course, some parts of this leak may not be accurate, things may also change in the future, but I wanted to report on this because Tom Henderson has been largely reliable when it comes to games, including some Star Wars stuff in the past. Now, I actually made a video covering Tom's tweets that he posted late last night about how he knows what it is and wants to put out a report, but he doesn't know if it could be today or next year. Thankfully, it was today. And I basically went through the reason why this game won't have a multiplayer component probably, and why there isn't a multiplayer game and stuff like that, and I thought it was a really good conversation, so that's going to be the remainder of this video. I didn't want to scrap it. I think there is a lot to discuss and a lot of interesting points to talk about, so that's what we'll get into right now. The FPS genre is a huge market, plus the two Battlefront games are humongous themselves. Those are the two best-selling Star Wars games of all time by quite some margin. On top of that, given Battlefront 2 ended almost 4 years ago now, can you believe it? There is a growing hunger and desperation for a multiplayer Star Wars game to fill the void it left behind. If you look at the upcoming Star Wars games, there's barely any multiplayer in sight. This month, the Dark Forces remaster comes out. No multiplayer. Star Wars Hunters is going to be releasing soon as well. It's a shooter and multiplayer, but it is only for the Nintendo Switch and mobile phones, or the PC through emulation. The Battlefront audience don't want to emulate the game on PC, or play on their mobile. They want to play the game on console. If it was on console, we'd be fine, but at this moment in time, it's not coming to console, anytime soon at least. Star Wars Outlaws, probably the other most anticipated Star Wars game, is an open-world single-player Star Wars game, no multiplayer. Bit Reactor are currently working with Respawn to create a strategy game, which may have a multiplayer component, but again, this won't be a shooter, and it's going to be mostly focused on single-player, I'd imagine, based on what we know where Bit Reactor came from, the XCOM series. Just a side note, I'm going to be having a video talking about that game with some new information in the coming weeks, so make sure you are subscribed for that. Skydance New Media are developing a new Star Wars game, and it's being led by Amy Hennig, who is famous for making single-player only games such as Uncharted. So that game probably won't have multiplayer. There's going to be a third Jedi game from Respawn. Again, no multiplayer. The KOTOR remake won't have multiplayer. Star Wars Eclipse is going to be a single-player game. There were rumours it would have some sort of co-op integration, maybe a multiplayer mode. However, that is a pipe dream. That's an ambition for which the game engine they're using doesn't have built into it yet. And that game is many years away. Of course, there are more Star Wars games in development right now that we don't know about. And they may have multiplayer. But still, there are several games we know are coming out, and other than Hunters, which we don't count, almost none of them will have multiplayer. Look, I love single-player games, including all of the single-player Star Wars games that have been coming out. And I know there is a massive audience that only want single-player story Star Wars games. But at the same time, don't kid yourself, there is another huge portion of people, millions upon millions, that want a multiplayer Star Wars game over single-player games. Right now, every single Star Wars game is a single-player story game, and the ratio is just not good. Having one live service multiplayer Star Wars game that isn't Galaxy of Heroes, Fortnite skins, or Star Wars Hunters would go a very long way. Just having one that's concurrent for several years, alongside all of these single-player games, would be fine. So a lot of people have been hoping, and even expecting, this FPS game by Respawn to be a multiplayer game. Some even have convinced themselves it's Battlefront 3, even though for the past 18 months or so, I've been saying it's not going to be that, because I uncovered some job listings that stated that the game is going to be a story-driven, single-player Star Wars game. And the job listings also stated it would be inspired by Dark Forces and Jedi Knight's Dark Forces 2. Not Battlefront. It's nothing to do with Battlefront. Even though job listings aren't 100% accurate all of the time and don't reveal every piece of information regarding a game, I took what we had and prepared for the worst, that this game will only have single player and no multiplayer, because in my opinion it's better to expect nothing than expect everything and get disappointed. For a while now, I've just taken this game as going to be just a strictly single player Star Wars experience, and to make matters worse, Elite Today seems to suggest that is going to be the case. So overall, our last hope for multiplayer Star Wars games in the next couple of years is dead, I would say, because it was all riding on this FPS game. So many people wanted it to be that, and it's not looking like it at all. It's going to be a single-player game. So you are probably wondering, why is this Respawn game a single-player game? Where are the multiplayer Star Wars games? Why hasn't anyone made one? Well, I wanted to share some reasoning behind why there hasn't been one for 4 years now. I've been analysing and looking into gaming publishers, what they've said to investors, and their general business decisions. Right now, there are just a few live service multiplayer games that have the overwhelming majority of the market, and they're taking up everyone's time. The likes of Fortnite, FIFA, Madden, Call of Duty, Apex, games like that. Launching a new multiplayer live service game is, at this moment in time, considered business suicide effectively. It's very high risk and high reward, but so many games are coming out and die pretty quickly. There have been thousands upon thousands of job losses in the games industry this year alone. You have far less people making games, and a lot of games coming out that just aren't doing well because there are too many games. Most people can only dedicate their free time to, say, 1 or 2 dedicated live service games. I struggle managing my live service games. I want to play Halo Infinite, Apex, GTA, Battlefield, the finals, and more, and it's very difficult to keep up. If people have already invested lots of money and hundreds or thousands of hours into a game, why would they suddenly switch to a new game? That's the issue. Publishers don't want to take risks, they just want to make safe single-player games that will sell millions of copies and profit very easily without having to risk a dead-on-arrival multiplayer game. On top of that, you have to pay a license fee and a cut of all of the money that you make, so you will be making even less money than if it was your original IP. However, you do have the backing of Star Wars, for example. It's just a much more marketable idea over, say, a new IP that people don't know about. So there is some pros and cons. The difference is, though, it's not like there has been a saturation of Star Wars multiplayer games. You've had Battlefront 1 and 2, but those released many years ago, and they stopped getting updates 4 years ago. So there's no competition in relation to Star Wars directly. This is why I believe a multiplayer Star Wars game can exist and be very successful. Plus you just have the abundance of new media coming out. The Mandalorian, Acolyte, Andor, Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett. You've got all of this new content that isn't in games outside of Galaxy of Heroes and Fortnite skins. It won't just be a generic new game like all of the others on the market that try to compete with each other. It will stand out because it has an established fan base waiting for it. Some people know they want it, some people don't, but they're waiting. There are a few outliers here and there in the form of, say, Helldivers 2 most recently, which has just launched. It's not a free-to-play game, it's a multiplayer-only $40 game, and it's had roaring success. The problem is publishers are afraid of taking a risk, because it's just less likely to happen than releasing a single-player game. A single-player game can come out and do fine, and people that play it for a few weeks, and then they're done, and move on to the next game. It's not competing as much with other games, and it also has long legs, because multiplayer games are all about the here and now, what's happening in-game this week. If you miss out, you miss out, whereas with a single-player game, you can come to that game many years later and still get the full experience. There are far too many live service games on the market right now. So many have been suffering a long, slow death due to dwindling player numbers. Some have shut down prematurely because of a large drop in player counts, or no players at all, and some have been straight up cancelled before they have even been released. These are all good reasons as to why we don't have a multiplayer Star Wars game right now, but I do think they are misguided a bit because the Battlefront audience is huge. People don't realise how big this audience is. I don't get it. They just haven't really looked at the data, I guess, which is crazy. They are willing to pay money for a multiplayer Star Wars game and will be there day one. We will be there. I just hope there is a multiplayer game in development that we don't know about, but I don't have much hope. I feel like we'd have heard something by now if that would have been the case. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything I've talked about in this video, so please do let me know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please do drop a like. Subscribe so you don't miss any future news videos on this game, and if you missed any of my previous videos, click on the playlist on screen right now, and I shall see you in my next video. Goodbye.